Judas Iscariot betrays Jesus. Judas Iscariot serves as one of the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus to be part of his inner circle. Despite witnessing Jesus' miracles, teachings, and demonstrations of divine power for approximately 3 years, Judas makes the decision to betray his master to the religious authorities who seek to arrest and kill him. The betrayal begins when Judas approaches the chief priests and asks what they will give him in exchange for delivering Jesus to them. The religious leaders agree to pay Judas 30 pieces of silver, the exact amount specified in Old Testament law, as compensation for a slave who has been killed by an ox. This price represents both the religious leaders' contempt for Jesus and the fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy about the Good Shepherd being valued at the price of a slave. Judas receives the money and begins looking for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to the authorities when no crowd is present. The religious leaders want to avoid arresting Jesus publicly because they fear the people who regard him as a prophet might riot in his defense. The actual betrayal occurs in the Garden of Gethsemane during the night after the Last Supper. Judas leads a large crowd of armed men sent by the chief priests and elders to arrest Jesus. Since the arrest happens in darkness and the soldiers might not recognize Jesus among his disciples, Judas arranges a signal to identify him. He tells the soldiers that whomever he kisses will be Jesus, and they should seize that person. When Judas approaches Jesus in the garden, he greets him with the words, "Hail, Rabbi," and kisses him. This kiss represents the ultimate perversion of a gesture normally used to show respect and affection between teacher and student. Jesus responds by calling Judas friend and asking if he has come to betray the Son of Man with a kiss, highlighting the contradiction between Judas's actions and the intimate nature of his chosen signal. After Jesus is arrested and condemned to death, Judas experiences overwhelming remorse for his actions. He returns to the chief priests and elders, attempting to give back the 30 pieces of silver, while declaring that he has sinned by betraying innocent blood. The religious leaders refuse to take back the money, telling Judas that his guilt is his own responsibility. Unable to bear his guilt, Judas throws the silver pieces into the temple and leaves. The chief priests cannot put the money back into the temple treasury because it is blood money, so they use it to buy a potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. Judas then goes out and hangs himself, ending his life in despair over his betrayal. Delilah betrays Samson. Delilah lives in the valley of Sorek and becomes the object of Samson's love during his time as a judge over Israel. The Philistine rulers approach her with a proposition to discover the source of Samson's extraordinary strength, which has made him nearly invincible against their armies, and a constant threat to their control over the region. The Philistine lords offer Delilah 1,100 pieces of silver from each of them in exchange for learning how to overpower Samson. This represents an enormous sum of money, as 5 Philistine rulers would provide her with 5,500 pieces of silver total, making her extremely wealthy. The amount demonstrates how desperately the Philistines want to capture Samson and end his devastating attacks on their people. Delilah begins her campaign of deception by directly asking Samson to reveal the secret of his great strength and how he might be bound and subdued. Samson responds with false information, telling her that if he is tied with 7 fresh bowstrings that have never been dried, he will become weak like any other man. Delilah obtains these bowstrings from the Philistines, who hide in her room, waiting to capture Samson. After Samson falls asleep, Delilah binds him with the bowstrings and then shouts that the Philistines are upon him. Samson immediately breaks the bowstrings as easily as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire, proving that his strength remains intact. The hidden Philistines realize the deception and retreat without attempting to capture him. Delilah accuses Samson of mocking her and lying to her, then asks again for the true secret of his strength. Samson gives her a second false answer, claiming that new ropes that have never been used will render him powerless. Delilah follows the same pattern, binding him with new ropes while Philistines wait in hiding, then calling out the warning. Again, Samson breaks free effortlessly, snapping the ropes off his arms like thread. The third deception involves Samson telling Delilah that weaving the 7 locks of his hair into a web and fastening it with a pin will make him weak. Delilah performs this action while he sleeps, but when she awakens him with her warning cry, he pulls away the pin along with the entire loom, demonstrating that his strength remains undiminished. Delilah intensifies her psychological pressure, telling Samson that he cannot truly love her if he continues to mock her and refuse to share his heart with her. She presses him daily with her words and urges him until his soul becomes vexed to death by her constant manipulation. Finally, worn down by her relentless campaign, Samson reveals the true source of his power. Samson explains that he has been a Nazirite dedicated to God from birth, meaning no razor has ever touched his head. His hair represents his covenant with God, and if it is shaved off, his strength will leave him, and he will become weak like any other man. Delilah recognizes that this time, Samson has told her the truth, because he has revealed his whole heart to her. Delilah sends word to the Philistine rulers that Samson has finally revealed his secret, and they come bringing the promised payment. She lulls Samson to sleep on her knees, then calls for a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. As soon as his hair is cut, his strength departs from him, fulfilling his own prediction. When Delilah awakens him with her familiar cry, Samson expects to shake himself free as before, but he does not realize that the Lord has departed from him. The Philistines immediately seize the now powerless Samson, gouge out his eyes, and take him to Gaza, where they bind him with bronze shackles and force him to grind grain in the prison like an animal. Absalom betrays his father, David. Absalom, David's 3rd son, begins his betrayal through a calculated campaign to undermine his father's authority and win the loyalty of the Israelite people. After returning from exile for killing his brother Amnon, Absalom spends 4 years systematically positioning himself as an alternative to David's leadership. Absalom stations himself at the gate of the city where people come to seek justice from the king. When anyone approaches with a legal dispute or complaint, Absalom intercepts them before they can reach David. He listens to their cases and consistently tells them that their matters are good and right, but unfortunately no one has been appointed by the king to hear them. This creates the impression that David is neglecting his judicial responsibilities and failing to provide justice for his people. After expressing sympathy for their situations, Absalom tells each person that if only he were made judge in the land, everyone who has a lawsuit or cause could come to him, and he would give them justice. This statement plants the idea that Absalom would be a more accessible and effective leader than his father. When people bow down to show him respect, Absalom refuses to accept the formal gesture and instead embraces and kisses them, treating them as equals rather than subjects. Through this consistent pattern of behavior, Absalom steals the hearts of the men of Israel. The Hebrew phrase indicates that he wins their affection and loyalty away from David through his apparent concern for their welfare and his promise of better leadership. People begin to see Absalom as someone who truly cares about their problems and would solve them if given the opportunity. After 4 years of this preparation, Absalom requests permission from David to go to Hebron to fulfill a vow he claims to have made to the Lord while living in exile. David grants this request, not suspecting his son's true intentions. Absalom travels to Hebron, which was David's first capital, and holds symbolic significance as the place where David was first crowned king over Judah. From Hebron, Absalom sends secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, with instructions to proclaim him as king when they hear the sound of the trumpet. He also invites 200 men from Jerusalem to accompany him, presenting the trip as a religious pilgrimage. These men go in their innocence, not knowing about Absalom's conspiracy. Absalom's rebellion gains significant momentum when Ahithophel, David's trusted counselor and one of the wisest men in Israel, joins the conspiracy. Ahithophel's support lends credibility and strategic planning to the revolt, as his counsel is regarded as if one inquired of the word of God. The conspiracy grows stronger as more people continually join Absalom's cause. When David receives news of the rebellion, he realizes that Absalom has successfully turned the hearts of the men of Israel away from him. David makes the difficult decision to flee Jerusalem with his loyal followers rather than fight a civil war in the city. This flight represents the lowest point of David's reign, as he is forced to abandon his capital and his throne by his own son. The rebellion culminates in a battle in the forest of Ephraim, where David's forces, led by Joab, defeat Absalom's army. During the battle, Absalom's head becomes caught in the thick branches of a great oak tree while he is riding his mule. The mule continues moving, leaving Absalom hanging helplessly in the tree. Despite David's specific command to deal gently with Absalom, Joab takes 3 spears and thrusts them through Absalom's heart while he is still alive in the oak tree. 10 of Joab's armor-bearers then surround Absalom and kill him, ending the rebellion and the betrayal that tore David's kingdom apart. Judas's parallel, Ahithophel's betrayal. Ahithophel serves as David's most trusted counselor and advisor, holding a position of extraordinary influence in the royal court. His counsel is so highly regarded that both David and all the people consider his advice equivalent to inquiring directly of God. This level of respect and trust makes his eventual betrayal particularly devastating and shocking to David and the entire kingdom. When Absalom launches his rebellion against David, Ahithophel makes the calculated decision to abandon his longtime king and join the conspiracy. His defection represents one of the most significant blows to David's cause, as losing such a respected and strategically minded advisor strengthens Absalom's position considerably. The betrayal is especially painful for David because Ahithophel has been not just a counselor, but a close personal friend. Ahithophel's first counsel to Absalom demonstrates his understanding of political symbolism and the need to make the rebellion irreversible. He advises Absalom to publicly go in to his father's concubines on the roof of the palace where all Israel can see. This act represents the ultimate claim to royal authority, as taking the king's concubines signifies complete assumption of power. The public nature of this action ensures that reconciliation between father and son becomes impossible, forcing everyone to choose sides definitively. Ahithophel then provides Absalom with military counsel designed to quickly end David's resistance. He requests 12,000 men to pursue David immediately while he is weary and weak from fleeing Jerusalem. Ahithophel's strategy involves striking David personally, while his followers are demoralized and scattered, believing that killing David will cause his supporters to surrender without further fighting. This plan demonstrates Ahithophel's shrewd understanding of how to end the conflict swiftly and decisively. However, God intervenes to defeat Ahithophel's counsel through Hushai the Archite, David's friend who remains in Jerusalem as a spy. Hushai presents an alternative strategy that appeals to Absalom's pride and desire for a glorious victory. He suggests gathering all Israel from Dan to Beersheba for a massive assault that will ensure complete victory and prevent any of David's men from escaping. This plan sounds more appealing to Absalom because it promises total triumph rather than a quick assassination. When Absalom and the elders of Israel choose Hushai's counsel over Ahithophel's advice, Ahithophel immediately recognizes that the rebellion is doomed to fail. His political experience and strategic mind tell him that delay will allow David time to regroup, gather loyal forces, and potentially turn the tide of the conflict. Ahithophel understands that his own fate is now sealed, as David will certainly execute him for treason if the rebellion fails. Faced with the certainty of defeat and execution, Ahithophel makes a deliberate decision to end his own life. He saddles his donkey, returns to his home city, sets his house in order by making final arrangements for his family and property, and then hangs himself. His suicide represents both an acknowledgement of his failed betrayal and an attempt to avoid the shame and punishment that would follow David's inevitable victory. Ahithophel's betrayal and suicide create a clear parallel to Judas Iscariot's later betrayal of Jesus. Both men hold positions of trust and intimacy with their leaders. Both betray their masters for calculated reasons, both see their plans ultimately fail, and both respond to their failure by committing suicide through hanging. This parallel demonstrates how patterns of betrayal and their consequences repeat throughout biblical history. Joseph's brothers betray him. Joseph becomes the favored son of his father Jacob, who loves him more than all his other children because Joseph is born to him in his old age. Jacob demonstrates this favoritism by making Joseph a coat of many colors, a special garment that sets him apart from his brothers and symbolizes his preferred status in the family. This visible sign of Jacob's preference creates intense jealousy and resentment among Joseph's 10 older brothers. Joseph's dreams intensify his brothers' hatred toward him. In the first dream, Joseph sees himself and his brothers binding sheaves in the field, when his sheaf rises and stands upright, while his brothers' sheaves bow down to his sheaf. When Joseph shares this dream, his brothers immediately understand its meaning and become angry at the implication that they will someday bow down to him. In the second dream, Joseph sees the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him, representing his parents and brothers submitting to his authority. Even Jacob rebukes Joseph for this dream, though he keeps the matter in mind. The brothers' hatred reaches a breaking point when Jacob sends Joseph to check on them while they are pasturing the flocks near Shechem. When the brothers see Joseph approaching from a distance, still wearing his distinctive coat, they conspire together to kill him. They refer to him mockingly as this dreamer and plan to throw his body into a pit, then tell their father that a wild animal has devoured him. They believe this will end Joseph's dreams of ruling over them. Reuben, the eldest brother, intervenes to save Joseph's life by suggesting they throw him into a pit without killing him directly. Reuben secretly plans to rescue Joseph later and return him safely to their father. When Joseph reaches his brothers, they strip off his coat of many colors and cast him into an empty pit that contains no water, leaving him trapped but alive. While eating their meal, the brothers see a caravan of Ishmaelite traders approaching on their way to Egypt with spices, balm, and myrrh. Judas suggests that instead of leaving Joseph to die in the pit, they should sell him to the traders for profit. He argues that killing their brother would accomplish nothing beneficial, and that selling him will remove him from their lives while providing them with money. The brothers agree to this plan and pull Joseph out of the pit. The brothers sell Joseph to the Midianite merchants for 20 pieces of silver, the standard price for a slave of his age. The traders take Joseph with them to Egypt, where he will eventually be sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. This sale effectively removes Joseph from his family and homeland, seemingly ending any possibility of his dreams coming true. To cover up their crime, the brothers take Joseph's coat of many colors and dip it in the blood of a goat they have killed. They bring the bloodied garment to Jacob and ask him to identify whether it belongs to his son. Jacob immediately recognizes the coat and concludes that Joseph has been torn to pieces by a wild animal. Jacob tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, and mourns for his son many days, refusing all comfort from his children because he believes Joseph is dead. The brothers maintain their deception for years, allowing their father to grieve for his supposedly dead son while knowing that Joseph is alive in Egypt. Their betrayal appears to have succeeded in eliminating Joseph's threat to their position and ending his dreams of authority over them. However, divine providence transforms their betrayal into the means of salvation for their entire family. Joseph's time in Egypt, though beginning with slavery and imprisonment, eventually leads to his elevation as second in command over all Egypt. When famine strikes the land of Canaan, Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to buy grain, not knowing they will encounter the brother they betrayed. Joseph's dreams ultimately come true as his brothers bow down before him, though they do not initially recognize him. The betrayal that was meant to destroy Joseph becomes the instrument God uses to preserve the family of Israel and fulfill his covenant promises. Peter denies Jesus. Peter's denial of Jesus occurs during the night of Jesus' arrest and trial, representing a moment of human weakness rather than calculated betrayal. Earlier that evening, Jesus warns his disciples that they will all fall away because of him that night. As it is written, that God will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. Peter responds with confident declarations that even if everyone else falls away, he will never do so, and that he is ready to go with Jesus both to prison and to death. Jesus specifically tells Peter that before the rooster crows that night, Peter will deny knowing him 3 times. Peter vehemently protests this prediction, insisting that even if he must die with Jesus, he will never deny him. All the other disciples make similar declarations of loyalty, not understanding the weakness that will overcome them under pressure. After Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter follows at a distance as the soldiers take Jesus to the high priest's house for questioning. Peter manages to gain entry to the courtyard, where servants and officers have made a fire to warm themselves during the cold night. Peter sits among them, trying to blend in and observe what happens to Jesus without drawing attention to himself. The first denial occurs when a servant girl notices Peter sitting by the fire and looks intently at him. She declares that this man was also with Jesus of Nazareth. Peter immediately denies any association with Jesus, claiming he does not know what the girl is talking about. He then moves away from the fire toward the gateway, perhaps hoping to avoid further scrutiny. At the gateway, another servant girl sees Peter and tells those standing nearby that this man was with Jesus the Nazarene. Peter again denies the accusation, this time with an oath, swearing that he does not know the man. His denial becomes more emphatic and includes calling down curses upon himself if he is lying. demonstrating his increasing desperation to distance himself from Jesus. After about an hour passes, Peter's third denial comes when several bystanders approach him with greater certainty. They insist that he must be one of Jesus' disciples because his Galilean accent betrays his regional origin, marking him as likely to be associated with Jesus, who is also from Galilee. One of the accusers is a relative of Malchus, the servant whose ear Peter cut off during Jesus' arrest, and this man claims to have seen Peter in the garden with Jesus. Faced with this more specific identification, Peter begins to curse and swear, vehemently denying that he knows Jesus. He calls down curses upon himself and swears oaths to convince his accusers that he has no connection to the man they are discussing. His language becomes increasingly desperate and profane as he tries to prove his innocence through the intensity of his denials. Immediately after Peter's third denial, while the words are still coming out of his mouth, a rooster crows. At that exact moment, Jesus turns and looks directly at Peter from where he is being questioned. The eye contact between Jesus and Peter occurs precisely as the rooster's crow fulfills Jesus' prediction, creating a moment of devastating realization for Peter. Peter suddenly remembers Jesus' specific words about denying him 3 times before the rooster crows. The weight of his failure crashes down upon him as he realizes he has done exactly what Jesus predicted, despite his confident protests that he would never deny his Lord. Peter immediately leaves the courtyard and goes outside, where he weeps bitterly over his failure and betrayal of the one he loves most. The crucial difference between Peter's denial and Judas's betrayal lies in their motivations and outcomes. Peter's denial stems from fear and human weakness in a moment of crisis, while Judas's betrayal involves premeditated planning for personal gain. Peter's immediate remorse and bitter weeping demonstrate his continued love for Jesus, while Judas's remorse leads only to despair and suicide. Jesus later restores Peter to fellowship and ministry, showing that denial motivated by fear can be forgiven and overcome, unlike betrayal motivated by greed and hardened rebellion.